Please, no more. So I'd like to introduce Jonathan Smith. He's our speaker for today, and he moved here to Jonesboro in 2010 to attend Arkansas State University, and ultimately he graduated with a master's degree in public administration. In 2015, he was given an opportunity to serve as a Jonesboro city planner, and he spent the next couple of years working on building permits, replats, rezonings, et cetera. And then he was promoted in 2018 to his current role as the redevelopment director for the city of Jonesboro. And over the last 18 months, he's been working with Mayor Perrin and the city council to create the newest city department, the Jonesboro Land Bank. So if you'd please give him a nice warm welcome, Jonathan Smith.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I always enjoy coming and speaking with our different civic clubs here in Jonesboro. Share something I'm passionate about with you guys. I made a mistake at the last time I did one of these. I didn't set my timer and I ran long, believe it or not. So I'm going to set my timer and we're going to stop at 12:50 to allow time for questions. Hopefully I can answer them for you. So as he said, my name is Jonathan Smith. I work as the Land Bank Director here for the City of Jonesboro. Just a quick, short timeline to share what led up to this point for both the Land Bank and myself. Mayor Perrin and the City Council, we decided to start looking at some way to identify and fight blight within Jonesboro sometime around 2016, 2017. After a little bit of research and meeting with other cities, we decided that a land bank would probably work best for the city to address some of the problems that we were having. So in December of 2017, just to fast forward, City Council approved the creation of the newest department, which is the Jonesboro Land Bank. Shortly thereafter, I would believe it's in April, Mayor Perrin appointed 9 volunteers to what's known as the Jonesboro Land Bank Commission. And I saw Corey in here somewhere. Corey serves as one of my commissioners. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. But really, the information you'll see in the following slides is a testament to the individuals who volunteer on the Land Bank Commission. We started doing business, if you want to call it that, buying and selling real estate in December of 2018. So it took us right at a year or a little over to set the frameworks up for our department and to get educated enough to where we could start functioning as a group. Briefly, commissioners, you're familiar with Dr. Warner. He serves as the chair. James Hollywood serves as our vice chair. And then we've got a nice diverse mix of people from different industries within Jonesboro, the financial sector, nonprofits. We got a real estate attorney, bank representatives here with Corey. A really good group, and like I said, a lot of the examples that I'm going to put in the slides that you're going to see is really a testament to those individuals and the work they've put in. Obviously, being a volunteer, they don't get paid, but I can speak from firsthand experience. Dr. Warner has put in countless hours to make sure the Land Bank Commission is successful, and they don't get enough credit either. The staff, Heather and Deanna in finance, they do a lot for us as well. So to get into the land bank and the purpose of our commission, the City Council back in December of 2017, when they passed the ordinance that created our department, they tasked us with the following purpose: reverse blight, increase home ownership, stabilize property values, provide affordable housing, and improve the health and safety of our neighborhoods here in Jonesboro. So one of the first things that we had to address as a group, how are we going to go about doing this with limited resources? We decided we would get the assistance of other departments in the city, and we looked at all the information that we could gather and ultimately decided that the best way to address blight, the best way to try to change some of these communities was to take our resources and focus them in 3. We wanted to start in 2, but then we decided we'd go to 3 general areas of Jonesboro, those areas being North Jonesboro, the West End, and Old Nettleton area, and I'll get into more later with that. Again, why did we pick these areas? First, we wanted to follow what's known as the Master Land Use Plan, which is the document that governs future development for the city of Jonesboro. Daryl and the city planner and his staff put that together every year, and it's adopted by city council. It's drafted with public input, staff input, and it's a really complete document that helps govern future development. So we wanted to try to mirror that as much as possible. Again, we got with our police department, we got with our finance department, we got code enforcement, we got all the crime information that we could get, we got all the outstanding financial data that we could gather. We put it on a map, and again, what I'm going to call proxies for blight appeared concentrated in these three main areas as well. And then a testament to my commissioners, we didn't want to just look at maps and do what I call office work. We decided to get out in the community. So Mayor Perrin and the Jets bus system was kind enough to lend us a bus. And as a group, we went out in Jonesboro and we got to see and we got to meet citizens in these areas. And after we got out and about and started seeing the situation and talking with people, we decided that these three areas was probably the best three areas that we could have the greatest impact. So we decided to start working with there. And the last one that I mentioned on here, establish neighborhood associations. For myself, and I know for our commissioners, it's extremely important to have the support of the neighborhood. If we're going to be spending taxpayers' dollars doing any type of development project, we want to make sure that the neighbors support what we're doing. The best way to get their feedback was at a neighborhood association meeting. So you'll see that, for example, North Jonesboro with Dr. Charles Coleman, the West End Association with Dr. Warner, they have strong, active association meetings. And so any project that we do in these areas, we're going to run it through their association first to make sure that the neighbors are on board before we spend taxpayers' money. So the three areas just on a map, again, don't worry if you can't read the street names. I'm going to zoom in. So North Jonesboro, this is commonly known for the ASU downtown connection that a lot of people talk about. This is also where the Veterans Village is going to be located. The Wolverine site is also in this. The governor identified it as an opportunity zone as well. So there's a lot of development incentives to start redevelopment in this specific area. It goes south to the railroad tracks, north to Belt Street. The land bank owns several lots, specifically on Bridge. We're currently in the process of closing, I want to say 7 or 8 lots on Bridge Street alone. And then, as I mentioned, we just got a grant. We'll be building the Veterans Village sometime within the next 18 months. So you'll see dirt work happening in this area, hopefully in the next few weeks. The second one, West End, this is the West End Association as well. It goes south to Nettleton, as far north as the railroad tracks, and then over to G Street. We'll get into another one of our development projects that we have. You'll see the star there in the middle. That's hopefully going to be our first rehab project where we plan on partnering with a private contractor, a private development firm, and we're going to take a house that you'll see later on in the slides, and we're going to hopefully take it from what you see to a new rehab house, and we're going to be able to provide hopefully an affordable house to a family here in Jonesboro. And then last, the third focus area, Nettleton. We haven't done as much work in this section over the past 10 months or so. You'll see the little green star there. I'll get into foreclosures at a later point, but the only thing we've done up to date in this area is try to recoup some money that code enforcement spent, and we're trying to do that through the first municipal foreclosure that we've done here in the city. And we'll get into that. So again, I just got 4 or 5 examples here of property in our inventory. There's several different ways that we bring property into ownership, into our inventory, if that's what you want to call it. Donations, tax liens, delinquent taxes, houses that are abandoned. All of these are situations that tend to present themselves when we start looking and working with an owner to figure out solutions to these problems here. So this is our first house. This is the first house we actually brought into our inventory. It's 115 North Drake. It's located in that ASU downtown corridor as well, just a couple blocks from the vet village. The owner, out-of-town owner, this is a property that taxpayers like yourselves were having to pay to have mowed, having to pay to repair some of the issues with the house. And so I approached him shortly after I started seeing all the invoices come through my office. I approached the owner about some sort of win-win situation. Maybe we could work something out to where we took over ownership and he got some sort of either cash deferral or tax deferral or something. Long story short, we worked out an agreement. He donated the house to us. After everything was said and done, I don't know if you can see at the bottom corner there, but after everything was said and done, closing costs and all that fun stuff, we paid $1,200 for the property. And we're currently working out another agreement with another individual who will hopefully take this house and rehab it. And I put on here, I presented this to council as well. The total value on this, they estimated, was $36,000 for what that was worth. Here's another parcel. It's right behind 115 North Drake. This is on Bridge Street. The owner lived in Mexico, and we were having to mow this as well. And instead of having to spend additional funds trying to mow it and maintain it and try to send invoices to him in Mexico, we decided the best course of action for us would try to take ownership and see if we couldn't get it in the hands of a developer who could possibly put something on there. So after working everything out, we decided, actually, no, this is a different lot. This is the one we got from the State Land Commissioner. This one is from the State Land Commissioner. We only paid $500. We actually got credit for liens that was placed on it. This is one that we're having to wait for a quiet title action to go through. This has several issues with the title that we're working out, but you'll see there was questions earlier about how does the financing work. We get credit for liens if we certify them through the state. So at the end of the day, we paid $500 for this lot. And you'll see it's valued at $5,000. This is the property that I was talking about with the gentleman who lived in Mexico. After everything was said and done with this gentleman, he ended up asking us to pay him $4,600 after closing costs and all that information. And we worked out an agreement. You'll see here, if I don't break the computer here, you'll see here that he owed the city somewhere around $600 to $700 in outstanding liens. Part of the agreement, he had to pay that money back. So the city was really only out, when we started writing checks, we was only out $4,000 for the cost of this lot, and it was right at $5,000 at its appraisal value. This is the last example I put in this presentation. This is the one I was talking about on the west end. This house, for the developers in the room, it sits on a corner lot. It's in fairly rough condition, and the city was going to have to make a decision about either condemning it and removing the structure, which would have cost about around $3,000 to $4,000, give or take, depending on the situations that are in the house. But instead of spending money trying to create a lot that would be too small to be redeveloped, we decided we would try a different approach. We would try to buy the property and get it in the hands of a developer who would be able to rehab the structure at a reasonable cost, and then we have other ways through CDBG funding and things of that nature to help the owner with down payment assistance. So this house, we're currently in the process of writing an RFP for, which is a request for proposal. We're going to be working, I think there's 4, maybe 5 contractors that met the qualifications for this project. The next step, we're going to be seeing what they want to do, how they want to rehab the house. Obviously, once we get those proposals in, we're going to have to run it through the West End Association, make sure that the neighbors are okay with the project that we're going to do. And then once we get that completed, we'll hopefully take this house and turn it into our first rehab project for the land bank. And here's some of the financial stuff. Paid $10,000 for the house. Again, one thing I want to point out that I haven't mentioned up to this point. The land bank, obviously we have to be responsible with taxpayers' money. We are concerned about the financial aspects of this, but when it comes to the projects that we do, we're not overly focused on the financial side. We're more focused on the outcome. That's the difference between the private sector buying and selling real estate and what the land bank is trying to do. It really wouldn't do us any good to try to make profit off the projects that we have if it's just going to turn it into more blight, if it's going to eventually turn into a slum house. So what we do is we focus on the outcome. And you'll see, we feel like these examples that I gave you here, these first few examples, we feel like we got these properties at a reasonable price. 827 Warner, the house that I just showed you, we did pay $10,000 for it, but that doesn't mean that the land bank's going to require a developer to pay $10,000 in order to rehab the project. Oftentimes, the situations we find ourselves in is kind of bridging the gap. So the proposals that we get, they may pay us $6,000 or $7,000 for this. They may pay us $1. But we're not going to solely focus on the financial side. We're going to look at how the house is going to look for that family when it's completed. This chart, the examples that I presented, I gave this to City Council a few weeks ago. They were asking some of the financials on this. You'll see that with these examples, we paid a total of $15,000, give or take $15,570. 501 Marshall, I put there. I didn't include any financial numbers on that. That is, as I mentioned, the first lien foreclosure. The city's trying to figure the way out with that. Essentially what happened, the owner of the property had a duplex that was deemed uninhabitable, and it was condemned by our code enforcement department. They failed to bring it up to repair, bring it up to code, so the city, the taxpayers, ended up having to go in and clean this property up. It cost us give or take $4,000 after everything was said and done. And in the past, the way this works, we would essentially have to wait for it to go tax delinquent for 4 years. We'd be responsible for mowing the lot, for maintaining it, taking care of it, because the owner essentially would abandon the property. And so what we're trying to do with these foreclosures is recoup as much of taxpayers' money back as we possibly can, since we did spend a significant amount on this project. And then if it's successful, it won't go directly into the inventory for the land bank. What they do is at these foreclosures, it goes up for auction. And so an ideal situation would be we get our money back through the foreclosure process. We can take taxpayers' money and put it toward a different project. And we also can stop taking care of 501 Marshall. We get it into the hands of somebody who really wants to redevelop that property. So if everything's successful, we should get $3,000 back into our budget, and that $15,000 will go down a little bit. Our next steps. So I've already talked about 827 Warner. Hopefully, if this process works out and we can create a blueprint for these types of situations moving forward. Oftentimes when we condemn houses and we're forced to remove them, we create a situation where either the lot's not zoned appropriately for a redevelopment project, the setbacks make it impossible to redevelop, maybe it's never been replatted, a whole bunch of issues that come up. And instead of spending money to create situations like that, we want to try to spend money to rehab and provide housing for low to moderate income individuals. That's the blueprint that we're working with. Again, lien foreclosures, I mentioned 501 Marshall already. We are working to identify some additional inventory. This time, when summer comes around, our code enforcement, they tend to get busy with mowing yards and having to do repairs around on various properties. The land bank, one of the things we took on was filing the lien paperwork, which is a whole process. So what that allows us to do is that we get to see the properties that code enforcement's having to mow, code enforcement's having to do repairs on, and we can reach out to those owners and see if there's a way that we could possibly assist either with ownership or with whatever issues they're having. And then the last thing we're currently working on, the land use plan. We need to find, for example, the ASU downtown connection. We need to find a way to correct zoning issues, correct title issues, a lot of that. So we're working closely with our planning department. And when they start going and updating the master land use plan, we're hopefully going to look at some sort of form-based code system and hopefully incorporate the redevelopment areas that we found and that we've identified in the land bank, and we're going to incorporate that into the master land use plan. And I think that is the last of my information. So I've left about 10 minutes or so for questions if there are any. If not, I can turn it back over to, yes, sir.
Do you partner with any groups such as Habitat, Development Council?
Yeah. So the question was, do we partner with, in his example, Habitat or Crowley's Ridge? The answer is we have not to this point. We do have a representative, if we go back here to the beginning, Jeff Herden is, he's a commissioner. He works with Habitat on a lot of his projects. We have, in the early stages, we have identified a couple of projects that we were trying to work out with Habitat. Long story short, we got to a situation where if the owner of the property didn't want to sell their property or get rid of it, we really couldn't proceed. And we were going to try to work out a project where we partnered with Habitat and partnered with the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas with some grant money and funds they had available. It didn't go as far as we'd hoped, so we hadn't had that opportunity to partner yet, but that is something in the future that we anticipate doing, is partnering with nonprofits like that and doing some projects. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea of expectations, how many lots or properties per year might pass through the land bank in the future?
So the question was, how many properties will come through the land bank, or how many do we anticipate coming through on an annual basis? And really, the only other one that we have to go off of in the state of Arkansas is Little Rock. And the problem is their cities larger than ours, right? And they've been around for a lot longer time. We really don't know. It's kind of touch and go at this point. Obviously, a lot depends on funding, right? This year, our budget, we had anticipated having a different number, but long story short, we had $25,000 in essentially land acquisition money that we got from the general fund. And obviously, anybody in real estate understands there's only so much you can do with $25,000. We've maximized that. Again, it's a testament to my commissioners. We maximized that. I think right now we have, 8 to 10 lots in the inventory. A few of them are currently going through closing right now. But definitely a lot of it's going to be dependent on the financial aspect of it. And as our finances increase, then we can take on more inventory. The goal would be not to have a whole bunch in our inventory, because the more we bring in, the more I have to find someone to mow it and maintain it. The goal is to bring it into the inventory and as quickly as possible correct the issues, whatever they are, whether it's lot size, title issues, correct those issues and get the properties in the hands of a developer or a private property owner who wants to take care of it. That way, taxpayers, again, aren't having to pay to keep this yard mowed or cleaned up. But I can't answer your question directly. We really don't know. Little Rock right now, for what it's worth, has about 95 properties in their inventory. But again, they've been doing this for 10 years and they're much larger. And they also have access to grant money and things of that nature that allow them to do small subdivisions. They've got a project right now where they're doing, I think, 10 houses, low to moderate income housing. And so they have quite a bit of inventory. We'll see. I think give us a couple years and we'll be able to really have a pattern and see what we'll get. Yes, ma'am.
If you know of a shambly, running down, falling down house that doesn't seem to be on anyone's radar, what would you do? I mean, I actually personally know of a house nearby my house that is like far worse a blight than what you've shown us here. For years, falling down, falling down. What's the best course to take?
So one of the unique aspects of a land bank is that we work closely. We're a collaborative effort, right? So we don't stand alone. And I say that to say this, the best way to go is through code enforcement and our inspections department. And the land bank partners on almost every project with those two other government departments. The problem we run into, there's all these houses, right? And we hear this all the time. Someone says there's a house that's run down in their neighborhood and they expect us to be able to do something. The problem is what the state of Arkansas identifies as a health and safety hazard is really low. The standard's really low. And our code enforcement department and inspections, we have to protect not only the neighborhood, but we have to protect the rights of the property owner. And a lot of times, as is in your case, I don't know the house, right? But the reason why our code enforcement hasn't identified that and tried to address it is oftentimes it's not really against code. And what will happen typically in these situations as well, when we go and we approach the owner about doing repairs to the structure, what they'll do is they'll go to Lowe's or Home Depot and they'll buy some OSB board or some type of lumber, and they'll board up the windows and they'll board up the door. And because that makes it a structurally sound and structurally safe structure, right, there's nothing we can do. So a lot of times, even if it is against code, what will happen is the owner will go and they'll just board the house up and leave it. And then you're sitting in a situation where we have to wait for it to either completely collapse because we don't have the codes needed to address it, or it goes tax delinquent. And when it goes tax delinquent, it takes 4 years for it to go through the county, and then another 2 years. No, it goes 2 years through the county and 2 years through the state. So a total of 4 years before it's ever auctioned off to somebody who might be able to rehab it.
Thanks for that. Actually, just reporting to thanks to the city online.
Yeah.
Will they give me follow-up on what's going to happen, or do I have to contact them and find out?
Usually, and I don't want to speak for them on every case, but typically they have a follow-up, especially if you go through the online portal. I know from my experiences in other departments, such as the planning and zoning, and now in my department, if you submit something on the online portal, typically the directors try to sit down for an hour or two throughout the week and respond to emails and to submittals like yourself, and at least give you a response. Now, I don't know anything about your situation, but at the end of this, if you'll write down your name and your contact information, I can at least get you an answer. I don't know where they're at in the process, and a lot of times there's a list too, just to be honest. We have 80 square miles that our inspector has to cover, and because of the way state statute lays this out, the only person who can condemn a piece of property is the chief building official, who is not even located in code enforcement, right? So really, when you condemn a piece of property, a lot of times you see code enforcement, and that's where people think they go, and they'll submit their complaint to code enforcement. But really, code enforcement doesn't have the authority to condemn a piece of property. It's the chief building official, Tim Renshaw. And so he has to cover 80 square miles in addition to doing building permits, like St. Bernard's, their project they have going on and all this. So he's busy, in other words. And a lot of times it takes a few weeks for him to be able to get to a request. So if you submitted it to code enforcement, I'm sure it's been sent to Tim, but I'll make sure that Tim has it. Okay? Yes, sir.
What's the typical turnaround time between property or the land bank getting property and then having it revamped in a way that has upgraded the property?
All right. So to answer the short answer to your question is we don't know yet, right? Our bylaws, right, which we're still testing them as we go. There's a lot that goes into creating the framework for a city department. But in theory, there is, I think, a 1-year requirement and then an additional grace period that the Land Bank Commission can issue. So in theory, it could go up to 2 years. We purchased our first piece of property in December of 2018, and here it is May. So 5 months, 6 months, give or take, is what we've actually been working. And we haven't sold any property yet. We've tried to build up our inventory, hopefully be able to get that into the hands of a developer either May or June. So it's going to be hopefully our very first project. And then once the land bank commissioners set the parameters for that developer to work, our bylaws say you got a year with a 1-year grace period. So it could take up to 2 years. I don't anticipate it taking that long, but I don't know. Our building permits, right? So if you come in and you apply for a building permit, those extend for 180 days, so 6 months. And we're going to have to work within the parameters of that, obviously, because any developer is going to have to get a building permit. So we'll see how it goes. And I'll let you know. I'm sure Dr. Warner will let you know, too, how it goes when we get it sold, and we'll all learn together on that. Yes, sir.
What's the status of the property maintenance code?
So he asked what the status of the maintenance code was. That is a completely separate issue from the land bank. I know I get that question a lot at these different civic clubs, and it's because there's a lot of, I guess, overlap between what the maintenance code could have done and what the land bank is currently trying to do. From a land bank perspective, I don't know if there's anything going on with the maintenance code. I don't think anything's even happening with it, to be honest. But if there is, it has nothing to do with the land bank. And so I wish I could give you a better answer on it, but I don't. The last update I heard, Jonesboro citizens turned it down. So, and then that's been where it's at.
But how would it have helped you had it passed?
So the question was, had the maintenance code passed, how would that have helped? I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've read the entire document because I believe that happened in 2012, which was a few years, or I think a couple years before I actually came on board in 2015. But I have seen a few papers laying around, and from what I've read, it was more stringent on the minimum building code allowances, right? So in other words, right now, her situation, for example, the house is caving in or it's falling down, and you think that it's against code. The reality is it's probably not. Had the maintenance code passed, the standard would have been a lot higher. And essentially, it wouldn't really have affected the land bank as much, right? Because that's not really in our ballpark. But what that would have done is it would have gave Tim Renshaw, our chief building official, our code enforcement officers, it would have given them another tool in their tool belt, essentially, to address blight and things of that nature. But obviously it didn't pass, right? So, any other questions? Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Jonathan, we appreciate you coming and speaking to us. It's a very good program, informative, and hopefully the land bank will have some success in those areas and turning things around. So